Hello and welcome to the MHR podcast. I'm Andy, and as ever, as soon as a budget has been announced, we're here to reflect on it and give you what it means for businesses and employees and everything you need to consider in between. So as ever, thank you guys. If you're a regular to the MHR podcast, you'll be familiar with Neil and James. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
Thank you.
As our in-house legislation experts, I really do value your opinion on kind of the feedback from the spring budget announcement, what we think it means for businesses, and any changes we think employees need to be considering as a result. But before we get started, I mean, we say this every time, don't we? Because we've done autumn budgets, we've done lots of different changes before in legislation. These things typically are known about before they're announced. There's not usually too many surprises. Is that the case in this one?
Yeah, possibly even more so than usual. Absolutely nothing really surprising coming out of the Chancellor's statement.
Yeah.
All the headline items were expected, if not the specific detail that something was certainly going to be happening.
Yeah, I mean, it was a loaded budget. It is an election year budget, and I think it's been very much framed that way. So people are trying to get the confidence behind that government as they're looming towards an election. But Neil, the same for you. Any kind of drastic surprises there?
No, not at all. Like you say, it's an election budget, and the Chancellor spent a fair amount of time baiting the opposition and making comparisons between Conservative policies and their policies.
Yeah.
It's very much an electioneering budget.
So what are the key headlines that we need to take away? And so there's a lot. I mean, it's probably worth us just naming a few of the headlines that were announced that are going to pique most people's interests, and then maybe we should dive deeper into the kind of the more legislation particular ones, if that's all right.
Yeah, sure.
So what are your main takeaways from this one?
For us, possibly the big headline item is a further 2% cut in the rate of national insurance for employees and the self-employed. Again, that had been widely publicised as being expected ahead of time. Changes to the non-domicile tax regime, which again, there's been quite a lot of news coverage around, and changes to the thresholds for the high income child benefit charge as well, which were probably some of the most widely publicised items ahead of the budget, which were all there as expected.
Yeah, I saw a couple of things as well. A lot of investment into, I think Hunt said that he feels that the UK is on track, the business relevant of course, the UK is on track to become the world's next Silicon Valley. What do you think about that?
So yes, also nipping at Hollywood's heels as well in terms of film development. So overall, the theme of the budget seems to be that the Chancellor's plan is to cut taxes to increase investment. Additional tax breaks for film industry, more levelling up funds. So what's called the Northeast Trailblazer Zone. Funds for the West Midlands, various other areas, as well as Canary Wharf and Surrey, those famous northern powerhouses. And as well as an increase to the VAT registration threshold. So for kind of lower turnover businesses and the self-employed, potentially bringing those out of VAT, and with the idea being that they can then invest further in their businesses.
Brilliant.
It was nice to see some money being spread around the country for community projects. Because particularly local authorities are sort of feeling the pinch finance-wise and are reducing the support that they give to that sort of thing. So it was nice to see some money from central government to sort of fill the gap to some extent, I suppose. Yeah,
I picked up on a few things in regards to public spending there as well. So public sector productivity is a drum that the Chancellor has been banging for a long time, reported the BBC, and Hunt says that he will keep the day-to-day public spending at 1% growth in real terms, but says the money will be spent more sensibly. So yeah, a lot of mention there on public spending there as well. Okay, so I think we've covered kind of the main topics that were covered, especially relevant to business and employers. Let's dig into them a bit more then. So the 2% national insurance cut.
Yeah, so following on from the 2% cut that took effect on the 6th of January after the autumn statement. We've got another 2% cut, bringing the standard employee rate down to 8%, and a decrease from 8% to 6% for self-employed rates of national insurance. Mention made of how national insurance is an unfair system, a double taxation in the Chancellor's words, but again, still kind of playing around the edges of that system. Probably won't also benefit kind of typically a key Tory voter, pensioners, as they won't pay national insurance. Just one last point, obviously, for software providers in payroll, is going to mean a little bit more work. As I think we'd hoped we'd finished our development for April, but we're anticipating we'll probably have a bit more to do after the budget today.
Yeah, so it is a consideration for employees in that context. And then moving on then, so you've talked about the change in taxation on nom-doms. Anything there we need to dive into or explain a bit further, or is that pretty self-explanatory?
Yeah, I think it's kind of self-explanatory. The current system has been criticised for years that it sort of overly encourages very rich people to come into this country and essentially pay very little tax because most of their income comes from other places. Yeah. And this, if in effect, is limiting that concession to 5 years. Yeah. Once these changes come into effect.
Cool. And then another thing that you picked up on there, James, as well, as the increase in HICB threshold.
Yes, so again, another system that's been widely criticised as being unfair. So currently, entitlement to child benefit is increased for those earning over £50,000. That threshold is now increasing to £60,000, at which point entitlement will begin to taper off through increased taxation up to an upper threshold of £80,000 now, which was previously 60. Doesn't really change the underlying system. So you can have the scenario where a single parent earns at the threshold and loses entitlement to child benefit, but a couple can be earning each just below that threshold with a much higher combined income, but does go some way to tackling that. The Chancellor saying that will give us the equivalent of an extra 10,000 people in the workforce by those increasing their working hours in line with the increased threshold.
Great. A few other things that they kind of skimmed over. So you've got like Hunt abolishes the furnished holiday lettings regime. There's Hunt announces the stamp duty relief. But there was a few bits of talk on the British ISA. I thought was relatively interesting. You mentioned before, Neil, that actually that ISAs are a bit confusing anyway. But there has been a few things announced here.
Yes, I mean we've got another ISA, so that hasn't really simplified the system because we've now got an extra one to choose from above all the others. I believe that this is another one that you can hold in addition to the other ISA. So in effect, it gives people who've already hit the limit on the ISAs that already exist. It gives them another investment opportunity where you don't pay tax on the returns. So in that sense, it's a good thing. Yeah,
and I saw that there was announced in order to encourage investment in UK stocks. So one of the things I took away from that it will also force local authorities and defined contribution pension funds to disclose how much they've invested in UK shares. And UK pension funds currently invest a fraction, which is only 4% in their assets, into UK shares. So I'm sure it's to crack that number up slightly.
Yeah, he's trying to increase that by exposing it to scrutiny, I guess. Making it more visible. He's hoping that the pension funds will increase the amount that they invest in UK stocks and shares to sort of appear better, if you like, more loyal.
And one final point from me, because we've talked about the main headlines. We've talked about how some of these affect different industries, like the entertainment ones. We've talked about levelling up. There's obviously an investment in green industries as well. So giving up to 120 million more into green industries for the growth accelerator. So this is to build supply chain for new technology such as offshore wind and carbon capture. Hunt also announces 270 million to advanced manufacturing industries to fund car and space innovation to grow a zero-emission vehicle and clean aviation technology. So again, just more example of what you said there, Neil, of lots of levelling up or investment in different industries there.
Yes.
Obviously important if you work in those. But any other headlines, any other observations you guys have made, any actions you think businesses need to be taking or be aware of?
I mean, from my point of view, as I said, it's all fairly non-controversial. What's been said, no surprises come out of that. There are going to be certainly investments that will benefit. I think largely the tax reliefs kind of, in terms of business, definitely favour smaller businesses, which allowing them to grow further, encourage them to invest further in the economy can only be a good thing.
Yeah.
But compared to kind of the autumn statement, it was largely just kind of extensions of previous measures, really.
Okay. And any final thoughts from you, Neil?
No, I agree with James, really. And it's, as always, businesses will have to evaluate the new reliefs and things that have been announced and see how they can best take advantage of them.
Brilliant. I appreciate both your time on that, and thank you for so speedily running across and giving us your views fresh off the press as they've been announced, even if we knew about some of them a few hours earlier as well. But I do appreciate your time. I'm sure we'll have you back in as soon as something else is announced that affects some business legislation. Thank you. And thank you guys for listening. If you want to find out more about what we do at MHR, check out mhrglobal.com. Check out our previous podcasts on all other legislation updates and everything else we do for HR, payroll and finance. Thank you very much.